You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Gave myself permission to like go big. And part of me was like, maybe I just quit, you know? So what I really tried to approach things with this year was like a return to just kind of the basics, the fundamentals. This thing doesn't have to look like you are training 6 hours a day and you're trying to compete as a CrossFit athlete. I think sometimes it's like, yeah, you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that's totally approachable. But like you said, it's harder to kind of internalize this idea of, no, they're doing all that in like a 72-hour stretch. It's hard to kind of pin it down into a specific process, but you know, it starts with me kind of at a whiteboard, putting together some ideas, thinking about what we need to hit. It really does kind of start big picture, like as concepts, and then they get whittled down into things that are actually look like workouts. I'm Adrian Bozman, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
You guys, you and Sherwood been cranking out content on your side of things with the podcast. I saw you guys were at like 154 episodes. Am I correct?
I don't even keep track. It's funny because you say we crank them out. I don't feel like we do. We put out one a week, steady. You know, it's just consistent every Tuesday. We film Wednesday, and then we put it out the next Tuesday. Try to keep a couple in the bank so we have some time if either of us has, you know, commitments that come up. But yeah, man, I think we started like early days of the pandemic, starting to get some stuff in the bank. And then, yeah, we just once a week. He's got a crazy schedule, you know, he's got a young daughter and a million different projects, and I go through JAGs where I'm super busy. So yeah, once a week is the jam. But I'm glad, and it just goes to show, right? If you're consistent with something, that it can look like a big body of work. Because from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, we're not cranking. We're doing exactly what we planned, which is nice and steady.
Do you enjoy doing it? Do you enjoy doing the podcast?
Yeah, man. And if we didn't enjoy it, we wouldn't do it. Like it's nobody tells us what to do. You know, it's just Pat and I will get together and say, okay, what's a topic we want to talk about, or people write in questions and we'll talk about things that they want to talk about. Yeah, so it's fun, and you know, it's easy in that regard, in the sense that it's just something we both like to do. So yeah, it's no big deal. And it is nice to have there's no outside input.
Just had Chris Henshaw on. Are you taking up running?
Not as much as I should, you know. Man, I feel like I should be a better runner than I am. And honestly, if I'm totally honest about it, I'd say probably the last year has been like the least physically disciplined I've been. Maybe since I was like 16. And I'm not like bumming on that. It's just kind of interesting. That's the facts, you know. Lucky enough that I've been physical, that I can kind of let it slide a little bit. It's still okay, but but it hasn't been amazing. I actually did a running workout today as part of a hero workout, and had a 1.5 mile in the middle of it. And I was like, yeah, I gotta run some more. This is not where it needs to be. How about you, man? You still doing ultras?
Yeah, I had a 50K I did down here in July. I did a 100-miler in April.
Oh,
and
man.
then I got a trail marathon, and I think another 50K in October and November. Then I'll probably sign up for 100 in the spring.
Man, so do you have like a goal that you want to do so many a year, or is it just the ones that pop up and you're like, that looks like it's cool? Like, how do you approach that? Because I mean, obviously you have to train a bunch to be ready for something like that.
Actually, so pretty much for the whole year leading into the 100, I would say I probably hadn't run more than 40 or 45 miles a week.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because I just got so busy in the winter with coaching wrestling and that stuff that.
Yep.
But I will say, from November pretty much through to April, I was getting out at least one day a week for like multiple hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I have a couple like bucket list ones that I want to check off, but the 50K just kind of popped up on my radar. Someone mentioned it to me. They're like, "Oh, you might like this. You should check it out." So it There's a 2.62 mile loop every 45 minutes.
For 50K.
Yeah.
So, okay. So how much time in the bank are you having after each loop?
I was getting right around 25 minutes.
Okay. So it's like you got about 20 minutes off and then would do the conversion for me. So what is it? 2.5 miles, 2.8
2.6.
miles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me do the quick 32. That's 4K. And it's a
Yeah.
50K race. So you did
Mhm.
that 12 and a bit times,
12
13 times.
Yeah, 12 times.
Dude. So it was a 12-hour race.
Yeah, pretty
Well,
much.
roughly. I guess less because you're doing 45 minutes, but well, that's rough. How'd it go?
It went well. I ended up getting second overall.
Nice.
And I wasn't paying attention to like the leaderboard
Yep.
because I'm just going out and see what kind of shape I'm in. I've had some time off from school. I've gotten back into, some serious training. Let me see where I'm at. And so I wasn't paying attention. I just kind of just stayed steady the whole time. Like there was people in the early laps that were, way ahead of me. And then slowly but surely, like I caught up to them by like lap 4 or 5 and then didn't see them again. So I kind of had an idea that I was like more towards the front. And then this one dude, he came up on me with like, it was probably like the 10th lap, maybe it's a ninth lap. And we started talking a little bit and I just wasn't in the mood to talk or whatever. And then I kind of ran away from him like the last little bit. And then the next lap, he got a little bit further. He got a little bit ahead of me. And then the next one, he got a little bit further ahead of me. And then the next one, the last lap, I didn't see him. He was like gone. He had like his fastest split was his last lap.
Dang.
But had I known that I was still in the lead going into the last lap, I might have mustered up a little bit. Problem was, with 2 laps to go, I took my shoes off to change my socks, and that was the first time all day that I had sat down.
Oh no.
And so when I got up, I felt like my legs were just everything had just kind of settled, and like
Yeah.
it was pretty bad the last 2 laps of rigor mortis.
Well, I was gonna ask, like, is it easier for you to have those kind of breaks, or is it tough to get back in gear?
If I had to choose, I would
Yeah.
definitely just be like, let's just go run 50K. Like I don't need any
Yeah.
breaks. It was a different challenge. It was definitely a different
Mhm.
mindset. The reason why I did it was because I was thinking about doing a similar event in October, which is a 5K every hour on the hour for 24 hours.
Dude, wait, I think Bill Henniger might have mentioned that to me. Where is that taking place?
This one's that I was looking at is in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think he was talking about a similar race style down in like Arkansas or Texas or something. But similar kind of deal where, and I think now that I think about it, it might be a race format where it's like last one standing. You just keep
Yeah,
going until
it's the backyard ultra.
that's
And the
crazy.
guy that started is the guy that started the Barclays Marathon.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it's a 4.12 mile loop every hour on the hour until like there's only one person left, and then that one person has to finish the last lap.
Brutal. Have you
But
guys? I haven't seen the new Barclay. I feel like there's another documentary that came out about it.
there's the original one. I think it's called the Barclays Marathon, the race that eats its children. I think it's what that one's called. And then there's another one that's really good called Where Dreams Go to Die.
I don't think I've seen that one.
That's a really good one. And then there's a new one that just came out. And it was following the guy who broke the Appalachian Trail record in like 2018, I think it was.
Hmm.
And it kind of follows him. It's pretty good. It's an interesting race. I had no interest in ever doing it
Why? Like, what's the difference? Why not that one, but all these other crazy races?
because there's no ribbons in the trees to tell me where to go. I got to figure out where to go, and I'm not into navigating. I don't mind going far. I just don't want to have to figure out where I'm going.
Yeah.
I get lost sometimes when the trails are marked. So
Buzz, you bring up that you didn't work out that much this year. You kind of let it slide. And I had a similar where I didn't work out at all this year. It was, the first time in a while. I'm just curious to why, what the reason was. Just did life happen, did work get more busy, or was your body just like, hey, it's time to chill out?
I think it was a combination of all three. It was like, yeah, I mean, it's been a rocky road in old CrossFit land for a few years now. And I feel like we're finally starting to kind of come out of that, which is nice. But yeah, like, being in the hot seat in 2022, it's just a lot of pressure. And like I put a lot of pressure on myself to try to do the best I could too, and all that. Hold on a sec. And yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't find a groove. And like in the past when that's happened, especially when I was, significantly younger, like I'd beat myself up a little bit and be pretty hard on myself about like, oh, I got to stay disciplined and this and that. And I think that's true to a point. But now that I'm a little older, a little wiser, I also feel that like I know who I am on a certain level. Like I'm not gonna not be a physical person, like I'm gonna be physical until they put me into the dirt. And so knowing that kind of gave me a little attitude to be like, okay, you know what, maybe this is just the season of life right now. Like I'm not hitting it that hard, and it is just kind of catch as catch can, and don't get stressed about that, because that's not going to help. It's not helpful to be sitting there being like, man, I really should. It's like, well, but you didn't. So so why are you stressing about it twice? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
I find that interesting because I feel like when you get older, that's kind of what happens is you navigate through. You maybe don't identify as much with this one thing, and that's kind of the thing that I was having. But to start off that, you said you feel like CrossFit's getting a little bit more stable now, coming out of the weeds. So what does CrossFit look like right now for maybe someone who hasn't been involved or been paying attention? What's it look like after the past 3 years, and kind of where's it going?
yeah, that's a really good question. So, COVID was rough for everybody. Well, if we go back even a little further, 2018, end of 2018 going into 2019, the company went through some major changes, decided that they weren't going to focus on some things, and the effect of that was like basically like eliminating a whole department overnight kind of thing. It was pretty rough. um and it's one of those things where you're like, even if you agree with the direction that you think you'll be heading, it's still hard to go through that kind of transition. And then right on the tail of that, after a year, was COVID. And so that was rough on everybody in a lot of different ways. And it turns out like a business that requires people to like get together and, sweat in close proximity to one another was not favored by the COVID gods as far as things that you could do. So that was tough. And then at the same time, we had change of leadership. The company got sold, and the new leadership kind of wasn't. It seemed like maybe they didn't know what they had bought, and it took them a while to kind of figure that out. And we had another change of leadership, and that's where we are now. So the newest CEO has been around for a little over a year now, and he's a CrossFit athlete. He's been doing this for like 8-9 years. He's got a background in leadership and working with high level companies, and he understands kind of CrossFit culture, which I think was kind of lacking previously. We went through the period where Dave Castro got fired. Now he's brought back, which is great, and so that's kind of where we are now. Is it feels like we're kind of at a point where the dust is settling and everybody's starting to pull in a similar direction. And this is kind of like inside baseball a little bit, but the games this year was a real big success for CrossFit, the company, in the sense that it wasn't just like, oh, lots of people watched, which they did, and that was great, but internally we had a ton of cooperation across the different departments, which has been historically like not as great, or it's been a while since we've been able to coordinate in this kind of way. So for example, like we had this big tie-in between what was happening on the competition floor and the main site and the cap programming for affiliates. And we, encouraged a ton of people to participate in a bunch of the workouts and kind of tie it together with the global community. And all of that took a lot of different people pulling in the same direction. And it came off really great. Like I think we had, oh, I can't remember the number now, but it was like thousands of people that all ran a 5K globally, on the same day that the competitors did. There were like thousands of people that did the benchmark workout Helen the same day the competitors did. There were thousands of people that logged an Olympic lifting total the same day the competitors did. So it was a really cool kind of return in that way, which gives me a lot of confidence and optimism for, hey man, if we pulled together and did that kind of cool stuff for the games, like there's lots of other things that we can be doing in a similar kind of cooperative spirit. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I think that's always what draws me back is the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Community component. So to hear that people were doing virtually doing 5Ks and turning in their totals and their Helen score, that's the thing that always brings me back and always has me in search for that. Jimmy and I have been a part of a few different gyms and trying to, I guess, chase that dragon of finding that original OG community from 2009, 2010, where it's like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
Give me the Kool-Aid.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure, man. But I do think there's a ton of power in that, right? Like it is really powerful, right? And you don't forget your first, I guess, is part of it too, right?
Yeah.
But I think as people get into their adult lives, there's less and less opportunity where you have a situation as an adult where you're surrounded by a room full of people that genuinely want the best for you, or at least that's kind of the reason that everybody's there. And I think that's pretty cool. So it's definitely something to foster once you found that,
You bring up the cohesion on the game side of things, between the games and the site and stuff. I'm curious because you mentioned kind of getting back to basics. Is the website and the daily WOD of the day, is that becoming more of a thing now? Because I know when we first got into it, that's how we got into it, and then we went to a box, and it was the community aspect, and that was a big part of it, and then going to a seminar, and that was, you guys had a well-oiled machine with the seminars, and then kind of where we kind of faded out is when the game just became the biggest thing ever on ESPN, and everyone wanted to be a CrossFitter. Where's it going in that direction? Is it more back towards the WOD of the day? How are the seminars going? What's that side of things look like?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And it's a recognition that, like, hey man, the games is awesome. It's a really cool outlet for, I guess, just the high end of things, and really just from like a fan perspective, it's like, man, it's incredible what these athletes can do and like what the range is that they have. But yes, there's very much this kind of getting back to like, hey, this thing doesn't have to look like you are training 6 hours a day and you're trying to compete as a CrossFit athlete. And in fact, for most people, it shouldn't look that way. And most people, it's like the utility is in that kind of short, punchy, in and out, super effective, driven by the community around you. And so, yeah, there is a return to that. And one of the things that they've started doing is it started actually with Dave, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, doing guest spots on the main site. So Dave programmed the main site for 2 weeks, and you had like little video reviews every day and stuff like that. Then it was back to just kind of our normal team, and I'm taking this round. So I don't know when this is going to air, but for today is September 11th to the 25th. I'll be my workouts on the main site, which is kind of fun. So we'll take a few weeks off, and then they have a whole kind of list of people that they want to kind of give guest spots to, because there's so many prominent people within the CrossFit community now. It's like, what a cool outlet to be able to bring them to the community and then refocus the community kind of back on that meeting point. Because to your point, that was very much how I started too. It's like, oh man, stumble across this website. What is this? Okay, it's a workout. What are people doing? Oh, they just like put their time and their thoughts on the comments, and that was the community at that point. It was small enough that there wasn't really another meeting place. So yeah, it is kind of cool to refocus on that.
So that's you 3x5 overhead squat, 3x3 front squat, 3x1 back squat.
Yeah, buddy. That's an old school main site workout though. That's like I lifted that from the archives. So I can't claim that one exactly, but yeah.
And before you guys started doing the guest spots, were you doing the main site programming?
Me personally,
Have you been doing the main site programming?
no. Oh,
No.
like doing it for my own fitness or doing it as like
I'm
running it.
sorry, programming it. Yeah, planning it.
No, I
No.
haven't. There's been periods of time in the past that I've contributed, but not anything recently.
Just before we kind of get into picking your brain on the program, and can you just state your title with CrossFit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the competition director. That's my job now. I've worn a couple different hats for CrossFit over the years, and it's always kind of funny to like, have a title that's kind of singular now because I've been involved a long time, and you guys know it was it was a scrappy kind of upstart thing, and everybody wore a lot of different hats. So to wear like one hat and have a title around it was always kind of funny to me now. It's great, but it's just it's kind of funny.
So
Yeah, competition director.
being the competition director, I'm curious to what the game planning goes into programming the games and maybe programming the qualifying aspect of the games as well. And how do you do that? Are you troubleshooting that throughout the year? Do you have people who you're throwing workouts out? Because this year, as someone who just comes in and views the games, looked way different to me than past ones. But I was really, I liked it. And then I said something to Rich about, oh, it didn't seem that heavy, and he's like, well, dude, there was a shit ton of sandbags, and you and I both know how heavy they are. And then
Pig.
the pig, there you go. The pig, that thing looked brutal too, and the sleds and the kettlebells. So I'm curious to what the thought process was that went into that, and I want to pick your brain on to kind of programming for the whole aspect of it, right? Because if you look at the games, right, you look at each workout, it's like, oh, that's doable, that's doable. But if you add those over 3 days for a
Yeah.
day, that's brutal. So I'm curious to pick your brain on that side of things too.
Yeah, and I think that can be missed sometimes, with a fan. I think sometimes it's like, yeah, you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that's totally approachable. But like you said, it's harder to kind of internalize this idea of no, they're doing all that in like a 72-hour stretch, and it is really kind of like a marathon in that sense. It's hard to kind of pin it down into a specific process, but it starts with me kind of at a whiteboard, putting together some ideas, thinking about what we need to hit, and then piecing together some workouts. It really does kind of start big picture like as concepts, and then they get whittled down into things that are actually look like workouts. And then I take those, and we have a competition team that helps to run the scoring and the judging and all the things that go into the competition itself. And so then they get to review it and basically poke holes in it and start to talk about why certain choices are made or what kind of choices could make it stronger, through the lens that they have. And that we rinse and repeat that a bunch, and then in the mix, there's also some feedback from the athletes that we test with. So it all kind of comes together to try to hammer out the best thing, the most complete test that we can offer for the athletes. But yeah, that's the process. And then as far as like your comment about it, okay, it didn't seem very heavy at the outset. So yeah, sure. If all you're looking for is that heavy barbell, there was an opportunity for that too. But I think it's one of those things that if you're really into CrossFit and you kind of, into the lore, it definitely goes through phases, right? And I feel like there was a phase where it's like people were so barbell heavy. It was like barbell everything, barbell all the time. And you get really good at that, and that's cool. But you forget that that's just one tool. And there's plenty of other tools that are both really legitimate for developing your fitness and then also for expressing it. And so if the claim is, hey, this person is fit and they can handle anything you throw at them, well, let's see if that's actually the case when they don't get their favorite implement and they have to apply it to something else. We did this workout with heavy kettlebells and sled pushes. And I mean, that was a brutally heavy workout. It's like a 18, 20 minute just grinder. where they're moving slow from, rep one. And to say that that's, there's not a significant strength component to that is kind of crazy. So yeah, to me, I think that's part of the job is looking for those opportunities where you can push people a little bit beyond what they might expect. That's obviously part of it, but also looking for ways it's like, okay, you have all this capacity developed in the gym. How can it be expressed in a way that might be a little bit outside?
Yeah, when that whole barbell phase came through, that's kind of when I realized I wasn't going to be the next Chris Spieler.
Yeah.
I was like,
It became
okay.
its own specialty. I mean, you still see it. I mean, just, how good some of those athletes are at cycling a barbell, and, they just, you have to double take it. Like, what's the weight for how many reps? And they're just moving it like it's nothing. It's pretty impressive, but it does become its own specialty at a certain point. It's like, okay, if that's all that you can do and that's all you're expected to do, you're missing the point a little bit.
Yeah. So how far out do you start whiteboarding this stuff? I mean, are you already got your whiteboard out for 2024? Or are you taking a little bit of a break? Like, how far in advance do you start bouncing things off the competition team?
Yeah, this early, there's nothing like concrete, but there's definitely concepts that start coming through, and I find too, like, the last 2 years that I've been lucky enough to put together a lot of the programming, like, it does kind of put you in that headspace when you get to see it unfold and you're watching the games where you're like, oh, it spurs more ideas. And that can be kind of like a really highly creative time, which is kind of weird because you come home and the event's exhausting. It's full days, and it doesn't matter if you're spectating or an athlete, staff, like everybody's just smashed at the end of the games, right? Like, it's a long competition. So it's this weird kind of double-edged sword where you're like, man, I feel highly creative right now, but at the same time, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to chill out. So it's a weird kind of mix. And then I don't know, if you guys have been following, we haven't announced it yet, but we've announced that we're changing venues, but we haven't announced the specific venue yet. And we'll be getting ready to do that pretty soon, probably in the next couple of weeks, all being well. And so that obviously has, there's a lot of challenges with going somewhere new where you don't know the systems yet. You got to, figure out some things that you kind of maybe not took for granted, but they became routine. And so that's, it's a lot of work to get up to speed on that, number one. And then number two, that also opens up some new creativity because you're like, okay, I have to think about this in a way that I kind of started to take for granted a little bit, being somewhere for multiple years. So anyway, long-winded way of saying, yeah, it's definitely started, but it's, there's nothing concrete. There's nothing like testable yet. But yeah, it's coming quick.
When you say new location, is that like a whole new state or just a new venue?
Yeah, we'll be moving states. Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll be out of
cool.
Wisconsin. Yep, out of Madison.
Is that something that they're looking to do more regularly?
Yeah, I think long term, that's the goal is, like we had a really good run in Carson. We were there from 2010 to 2017. And then we were in Madison from 2017 till 2020. 2020 took a little sidetrack to go back to the ranch because of COVID, and then been in Madison the last couple of years. But yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal is to get to a place where we're more comfortable moving more regularly so that more people in more areas get to see the big show.
That's cool. Yeah, it seems like also too there's more foreign competition. We call them people from other countries that are, obviously had the Miko,
like
and
international
then the
competitors.
Icelandic folks, but now it seems like
Yep.
there's a broad spectrum of international competitors, and they're people seem to love them. They're fan favorites.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, like on the horizon too, is like, we got to one day, I don't know if that's 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, who knows, but like at some point, yeah, we definitely have to take it overseas. And again, I think, getting in a position where we're comfortable moving helps to unlock that. but yeah, you're right. It's pretty cool to see. Back in the day, it was. I guess it still is. The majority of the athletes come from the United States and kind of North America, but more and more, it's like, man, there's a strong European contingent. Like the Oceania region and down Australia, New Zealand, like they're super strong athletes down there, and South America is coming up. Like it's really cool to see that over the years.
Yeah.
Boz, you brought up before being in the hot seat last year, and
Yep.
that being the first time you were kind of put under that spotlight. And I'm curious if there was any events that you programmed last year that afterwards that didn't go out how I planned, and how you kind of adjusted for this year, and if any of that happened this year or last year was kind of your experiment for that.
Yeah, it's hard to think back to the specifics about 2022. But I think what I would say broadly is that like I gave myself permission to like go big, because it was also sudden. Dave got fired, and it's like, okay, you're going to adopt a lot of his responsibilities. Didn't have a ton of time. Like we had so much of the season was already kind of on track to unfold the way that we had planned without, him being out of the picture. So it was a big shift, and it was a fast shift. And so, and it was like complicated in the sense that I was like, man, I don't know. Like Dave's my friend. I've worked with him for, since 2006. Yeah, 2006 is when I met Dave. And part of me was like, maybe I just quit, And so like I had to come to terms with that. And anyway, everything unfolded the way it did. When I got to the point that I'm like, all right, this is happening and I'm going to do it, I tried to give myself permission to be like, all right, well, just do it the way that you think you should do it without any kind of reservation. Kind of go big, because, I really was in the mindset of like, I don't know if they're going to let me do it again. So might as well just give it a shot. And so, I think there were a lot of people that fairly criticized last year's games, saying that there was a lot of new elements and maybe too much in one year. It's like, okay, that's fair. So what I really tried to approach things with this year was like a return to just kind of the basics, the fundamentals, and to not get too, not to get too carried away with trying to make it like new. The newness is going back and kind of digging into the vault and being like, all right, what was the original idea behind a CrossFit athlete? Are we still expressing that? And if not, like, can we get back to that? And so, yeah, this year I had like I have this like digital whiteboard program that I use, and you can leave like little sticky notes for yourself on there. And one of the big stickies that I had was just like, keep it simple, back to basics.
So I know you're supposed to love all your children equally, but did you have a favorite from this season, this games?
Oh man, this year I really love. We did like a beefed up version of Helen.
Yeah.
And it was really cool because it was the 20th anniversary of that showing up on CrossFit.com. We tied it back to like all the age group, and adaptive athletes did regular Helen. So like almost all the athletes there, we had like 400 athletes, and almost all of them did some version of Helen, which is really cool. And then the individuals did that beefed up version. And to me, it was just like such classic CrossFit in the sense that like no singular element of it was crazy. It's like 400-meter runs, bar muscle ups, and dumbbell snatches. Nothing on its face was too aggressive, which really forced the competitors to drag race. Like it was an all out race. And I thought it played out super well. And we had them run out the back of the stadium and, run back in, and crowd goes nuts every time there's like a position change in that run. So I thought that one played out really well. I was pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, that was fun to see. I always like when they throw in you guys put in like the classic, one of the girls get in there somehow, some way, some modification of it. I heard you talking with Pat saying that some of the backlash was that the dumbbells weren't heavy enough. But I really liked how you kind of broke it down, where it's like, it's not always has to be heavy. Like,
yeah,
let's go fast.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
see
Well,
who
and
can
that's
go fast.
who's got the guts to race, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. Yeah, and people forget that it's like it's easy to write something that's difficult. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you're going to add 1,000,000 pounds to the bar and you're going to do it for 1,000,000 reps and you're going to do 1,000 rounds. Like, of course it's hard, but is it well crafted? You know, does it really force somebody to display a certain characteristic? You know, and I think people forget sometimes that like the event itself, sometimes it is appropriate to have it be a spectacle, but if that's the only way that you're going back to the well, it's probably not going to be a pretty well-rounded test in the long run. You know, and you think about so many different events. I mean, man, you guys are fans of physical culture and wrestling and, you know, old school sports. It's like you look at the original kind of Olympic, you know, pantheon, I guess, of events. There's nothing complicated about them. It's like, how far can this thing get thrown? You know, who can beat this person in a foot race? Who can wrestle this person to the mat? You know what I mean? It's like there's nothing complicated about that. But when you see somebody do it at such a high level and with such skill and such ability, that's the real difference.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious. This is the first year that I had noticed it, so I don't forgive me if this wasn't the first year. But how long have the adaptive athletes been competing?
Yeah, we've had them at the games for a few years.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had uh 8 divisions in the open for a couple of years now. And yeah, we've gone through a couple different formats with them where they had a secondary qualifier online. This year they just had the open, and then some divisions came to the games. We had 3 divisions there this year. And yeah, it's super cool to see them you know, more and more highlighted and involved. And I mean, it's obviously impressive to see anybody do anything at a high level, but when you have somebody who's that dedicated to it, despite all the, you know, there's so many ways that an athlete in that position could tell themselves a story to check out, you know what I mean, or to play the victim or whatever, and to see that not be the case at all, yeah, it's awesome. And man, there are plenty of athletes within those divisions that if they were, you know, able-bodied, they would be in the mix with the individuals. You know, there's no question.
How does the programming of that? I mean, how do you plan for that? Do you
Yeah.
have a special team that's testing that stuff out?
Yeah, that's the way we've approached it. Is that, you know, we piggyback them with the age group competition. There's just so many divisions, and it makes sense kind of logistically. So that's the approach we've taken the last couple of years. And so what we'll use is kind of the base of the age group programming, and then we'll bring in a couple of adaptive specialists to take it and spin it and make it, you know, they're obviously like way more in touch with what's appropriate for those divisions in terms of movements and weights and things like that. So they'll take that base programming and then adapt it.
Okay, interesting, fascinating. Given going off of your feedback that you got from the competitors, what in their mind was the hardest WOD
This year?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
they all hated the 5K probably, but that wasn't the hardest event.
There are plenty of people that I think enjoyed the 5K and did okay with it.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, man, there's some really fast runners out there these days. So that was actually really cool to see, just like a pure event like that. We did the alpaca that we tried to do in 2022, but we got rained out and we redid it. You know, that one I think was pretty challenging, and especially for some of the competitors that did the modified version in 2022, because I think they came into it thinking it was going to be like a particular flavor, which was like much faster and way more kind of like, you know, 10-minute kind of classic CrossFit. Whereas the full version is like, I mean, it's beefy. So yeah.
I know you brought up like in the Super Helen Helena, like in that, I believe it was maybe the second workout that was the handstand push up, the free handstand push ups, and the
Oh yeah,
handstand walks.
the inverted medley. Yeah.
Yeah, when I saw that, I felt that was Boz all day. That was something that you would eat up.
Yeah, guilty, man. That's absolutely. But that was part of the theme this year was, if you look at kind of the big buckets of movement categories that the CrossFit athlete should be comfortable with, you have gymnastics movements where you're only, taking care of your own body weight. You've got weightlifting movements where you're moving something else, and then you have kind of monostructural stuff, which is locomotive, traditional cardio kind of movements. And what we wanted to do was have a pure test in each one of those. So the pure gymnastics test was that inverted medley. The pure weightlifting was the Olympic total. The pure monostructural was the 5K. And then obviously, they had 9 other events that mixed a bunch of them together and highlighted different aspects. But yeah, we wanted one of each. And yeah, that inverted medley was a lot of fun. It took a long time to get that one right. We had to test that one a ton. There were, I don't know how many different versions of it before we landed on that one.
You feel like the freestanding handstand push-ups is pretty essential for a CrossFit athlete at this point? Because I feel like maybe if you would have thrown that back maybe 5-10 years ago, you would have seen some glaring holes in something like that, where now I feel like it's pretty standard to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And especially at that level. And like, I think the competitors, so many of them are really good at kind of anticipating where things are going and reading between the lines. That those that study it and do their homework, like, yeah, man, they're expecting that for sure.
And bringing up the 5K and how, some people had different comments on that. You guys had the mountain bike at the beginning, and every year you guys try to throw something in there. And obviously, I don't want you to give us your secrets for next year, but what kind of is the direction you're looking for when you think, hey, is there anything we haven't done? Is there anything you guys haven't done that is kind of in your forethought right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's always like new combinations and I'm a little biased in the sense that I still think there's plenty of room for CrossFit athletes to expand their gymnastics knowledge. And how we choose to test that, I think, is something we got to really think about, because you don't want it to be a gymnastics meet. You don't want it to be a bunch of skills that don't really, I call them like dead end skills. They're great for what they are, but they don't really branch off to anything else. They don't really translate into much. I don't think that's really appropriate for the CrossFit athlete to be like tested on, right? It's too specific. But that being said, I think there's still a ton of meat on the bone for like more broad gymnastics. The other thing I would say is trying to use the venue that we're going to end up at with that in mind, and having some unique things to offer there. That I think that's going to be really cool to kind of have a new canvas.
I have a monostructural suggestion. I don't know where the new location is, but
Okay.
if you could find a vertical kilometer.
What is that?
So they have these Sky Race series, and it's basically you run vertical for anywhere from a kilometer to sometimes they're 3, 4, 5 miles. But I think like a vertical, like kind of like the cog in Colorado Springs. I don't know if you're familiar with that, like something like that.
Yep. Oh, I dig it. Yeah, kind of like it's like an aggressive bear crawl for a long time. Yeah, I love that. Like the what's that? Is it the Jacob's ladder? That's like the machine that you can see sometimes in some gyms. It's just like the endless rung, and you're at an angle like that. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
You know what else you brought to my mind, Rich? I know I think it's Toronto, they do like a stair series where they like climb a skyscraper up the stairway. I think that would be an interesting task as well.
Yeah, I love that sort of thing. I think stairs are awesome. Big hills, stuff like that is awesome. And often like kind of, I think a lot of competitors train using it, but like it's harder to test and bring into a competition because obviously you need like a unique geography to pull it off. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff. I think that's great. If memory serves, I think there was an event man, it might have been one of the events like in Dubai where they ran up one of those big skyscrapers. That was part
Right.
of it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. That I think that might have been a year or two ago now.
So we picked your brain on the programming aspect of things, and I know at the beginning of this podcast we kind of mentioned how athletes were coming in a little bit older and already seasoned on the athletic side of the things, and now we're getting more pure CrossFitters. We had a freshly out of high school female make the podium this year. What do you think? Do you think because people are more skilled now, is there a longer lifespan or is it shorter because it's constantly evolving and people get in there 5 years and they're out? What do you kind of think that looks like going forward?
I definitely think it's a longer time frame, but they've got to approach it intelligently. I think the challenge is going to be just making sure that you have an eye for that longevity. Because I think it's easy, and we've seen it in some athletes where they come in really strong, not just with that particular physical attribute, but like with a lot of head of steam, I guess is what I'm saying. And then a couple seasons in, they kind of disappear off the face of the earth. But I think the potential is there for people to have much longer CrossFit careers. I mean, and maybe not even in the sense that we haven't seen it. Like going back to the beginning of the conversation, you guys talked about Annie, and yeah, she started when she's 19. She's still competing. She's got, she's done it. She's done all of it, and she's still doing it at a high level. It's crazy. I think you're going to see more athletes in a position like Annie that if they choose to and they play it smart, they can have that kind of career longevity. Whereas, before, if you come into it and you're 29 years old and you're just getting started, you hit your stride at 33. It's like, okay, well, maybe you have a couple of really competitive seasons and that's it for you. So yeah, I think the potential is absolutely there. But I guess that's the trade-off, right? Is like you gotta understand what that means if that's something you want to do. Like being at the top of the game for a decade it's a hard thing no matter what you're doing, right?
Yeah, it's very impressive. I think Noah Olson's another guy that's seems like he's
Yep.
been around for a while.
Cole Sager's another one. I think he just hit 10 years. Like there's
uh
a he's
Bukowski, right? He's still around.
he's getting up there. Yep. Yeah, he took fourth this year. You know, he's knocking on the door of third. Yeah.
What was the biggest surprise for you in terms of athlete performance or lack thereof? Not to throw anyone under the bus.
Good question. I think I was really surprised that it was almost a Canadian sweep on the men's side. I don't think anybody expected that. Like I know that Vellner is a crowd favorite. He's always doing well. He's always on the podium or close to it. Fikowski's another big name like that. Adler looked like he was on fire coming out of semifinals. Like I remember seeing his semifinal performance, and I was like, man, if we see that Jeff Adler at the games, there's a good chance that he can take it. But when it was getting close to the end of the competition, and we're looking at it, it's like, man, this could be a full sweep on the men's side for Canada. It was like that was wild, So that was really unexpected. Trying to think back this as far as anything that really stood out surprise wise. Roman Krenikov is just so impressive. And not just, the heart that he showed at the end there with, it sucks when you get hurt and you still have to play. But just some of the things that he does as one of the bigger athletes in the field that you're like, you're not supposed to do that. You know what I mean? Like the way he hung on to a top finish in the 5K, like he did well in that event, but you size him up, you're like, how is this guy going to win a running event against some of these other athletes? Like, it doesn't make sense, So to see performances like that, I think is always really cool. And I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but like it is kind of surprising when you see it.
Absolutely.
Was that the event? Did he break his foot in the 5K, or was that
No, that was later. He broke his foot in it was on the final day on Sunday, and they had this muscle up and then get the sandbags over the logs. he came over one of the logs and hit his
Uh,
foot on the bag.
Do you know what? Did he break his one of his metatarsals?
I don't know the extent of it, and that's that kind of medical stuff is for him to share should he
Yeah,
choose. So,
sure, no doubt. I was just curious. I see your
ooh,
gi. Is that your gi in the back? Are you still rolling?
still rolling.
Okay.
And I guess this is given to me by a really good friend. You guys know Todd Widman? He's been around CrossFit for a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
Long time actually. Todd's a very, very dear friend of mine. He gave me that gi a couple of years back.
Okay. You still riding your bike?
Which one?
Your
The short answer is
motorcycle.
yes. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right, Boz, we got our standard rapid fire for you.
Okay.
So we'll see if
I'm ready.
things change, and I can't wait to get to the music part because you're our best guest when it comes to music.
I almost texted
100%.
you an album.
So, Boz, are you a coffee drinker?
Yes.
How do you brew your coffee, and how do you take it?
If I'm doing it at home, I got an AeroPress, or a little sacrilegious. The house that we moved into here, the fridge had like a dispenser on it. It's like a little Keurig thing built into the fridge, and it blew my mind. I'm like, I can have a robot fridge make me coffee, and like Keurig coffee is kind of whatever, but pretty badass to have your fridge make you coffee. So I'll do that on occasion as well.
You have a bean of choice that you're sipping on right now, or
I'm not that fancy.
roast? All right.
No, I'll tell you, most days I will take these mutts down the block. There's a really cool shop, Weak Coffee. Shout out to Weak Coffee. They're awesome. Really cool Nashville spot, and they are like a husband-wife duo that run out of a vintage drum store. It's super cool. So that's my go-to these days.
Okay. Boz, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
Not right now, but I've been cleaning up that property. I've been mowing like every day, brush cutting. That's my daily.
You had some big old tractor equipment up there, or what?
Not crazy. I have a walk behind brush cutter, and
Okay.
the thing's a tank. It's a 20 horsepower engine, and it'll cut down things, anything up to 3 inches in diameter. It'll take it down. So it's
Nice.
pretty, yeah.
You
So
doing that by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Did you say it's a farm or was a farm?
No, it's just
No.
like just a piece of land
All right.
out in the middle of nowhere.
Do you have any visions for it?
I'm dreaming the dream right now. Yeah, it's excuse me. It's got a house on it that needs to be knocked over. It's got some real problems with it. So it's not very livable. But so in the short term, I'd like to put up a barn and then move a bunch of my workout stuff there and use that as kind of like a primary workspace and like I guess an affiliate of sorts, mostly just kind of like a fitness collective. And then have that be built out enough that my wife and I, if we chose to, could spend like a night or 2 nights out there, have just enough out there that it's decent. And then in the long term, eventually put a house up there and I don't know, like maybe live there full time. But like I said, it's just kind of loose at this point.
How far is that from where you are?
It depends. It can be 30 minutes or it can be a lot longer than that. So it depends.
So
Yeah.
it's funny you bring that up. You said you're in Nashville, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I'm living in Florida now, and when I drove
Wait,
here
when did that happen?
after I graduated in May.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So when I drove through Nashville, that was some of the worst traffic I've ever experienced since I lived in California. How do you deal with that? And is it that bad all the time?
I don't have to deal with it because, I work in my garage most of the time, and the part of town I live in, like I don't have to go through downtown ever if I don't want to. So where we are, it's like it's not too bad. And I'll tell you, like the crazy thing about Nashville traffic is that it moves, which is kind of like a cheesy thing to say, but it's true. And then it's really predictable for the most part. Like if you time it, you can kind of avoid the windows. And so if you have flexibility in your schedule, like I do, I can kind of plan around this. Like, okay, I know I got a window from like 4 to 6:30, 4 to 7 is going to be bad. But if I can avoid that, then it's going to be cool.
All right. Good local tip. Good to
Yep.
know.
Yep.
Boz, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
I am so glad you asked. I am listening to nonstop the new album by Frankie and the Witch Fingers. It is so good. So good. You got to get on it, man. I was going to text it to you, but you know.
All right.
Yeah, Frankie and the Witch Fingers. Check it out. It's awesome. Been listening to that a lot. New OC's record almost got me for like album of the summer until Frankie and the Witch Fingers. I think that's top right now.
Oh man, I can't wait to check it.
Oh, it's so good. I'm gonna overhype it. And then there's a band that's touring with the Melvins right now that I'd never heard of. I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's like Mr. Flies, but spelled with a PHLYZZZ, something like that. I think it's Flies. Anyway, they're pretty rowdy.
All right.
So I've been digging that.
How did you find Frankie and the Witch Fingers?
There's another band that a friend of mine turned me on to called the Wine Lips. Oh, almost forgot how good that album is. Dude, that's another one. Write that one down. That Wine Lips album is so good. I can't remember the name of it. It's like it's a bunch of different. It's like mushroom something. It's the latest one that they have, but it's so good. And a buddy of mine turned me on to them, and I was checking to see if they're coming to town anytime soon. They are. They're coming up in like a week and a half, I think. And Frankie and the Witch Fingers is opening for them, and I'm like, never heard of those guys either. So I started digging into them. And awesome.
All right. I'm stoked.
Yeah.
You taking a lot of music now that you're in Nashville, like live music?
Not as much as I want. I'm starting to get better about it. But the first little while that we were here, we'll be coming up on 3 years now that we'll be here. And like the first 2, we kind of hit the ground running, with work and everything else. We had some family stuff going on with my wife. On her side of the family. So, just trying to keep things moving there. Didn't get out as much as I'd like to. So trying to take more advantage of that now. Because it really is a great town for that.
Yeah.
What's really wild is like you go to just like, a hole in the wall venue, and the sound production anywhere here is just so good. There's just so many talented people. That know what they're doing. It's like, yeah, you walk into even a place at the outside that you're like, I don't know if this is going to be what I hope it would be. But man, the sound in some of these rooms that they can get is just so good.
Have you had any Kid Rock sightings?
No, I have not.
No.
A different part of town. I'll keep my eyes peeled though.
Boz, I can't remember if we had switched this last question up before or after the last time you were on, but we have changed it. This time we're curious, do you have any guilty pleasures or guilty pleasure?
Ooh, I mean, yes. Let me think. Like these days, I would say, honestly, some of the guilty pleasures just going and waging war with nature out on my property. It's kind of a nice little escape. But recently, man, there's a place around the corner from us that does like really good local ice cream. And I hadn't been like into ice cream for years, like literally couldn't tell you the last time I had ice cream outside of this summer. And my wife and I have taken to riding our bikes down there in the evening, and it's been awesome. So that's a nice little, I'm not that guilty about it though. It's great. So that's one. Yeah, too much time mowing. It's my escape right now. Yeah, and I'm almost 40, so I got to have like an old man hobby at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. Got to have a killer set of tools.
That's right. Yeah. But I got to go one more guilty pleasure. This is actually, it's related, and it is like old man tools hobby. Dude, chainsawing is my guilty pleasure right now. God, man, any excuse. Like when we have a big storm come through, I'm like, ooh, I wonder how much wood fell down. My wife's name is Kim. I'm like, Kim, I'll see you later. I'll be back tonight. And I'll go out there and just rip with a chainsaw all day.
All right.
So fun.
Are we gonna see
Chainsaw.
a chainsaw at the CrossFit Games next year?
Oh man, dude. And that's like it's so bad. Every time I go to like a hardware store now, I'm like, I definitely need like 3 more chainsaws.
You have a fireplace at your place?
Yeah, well, I have I got something called a burn cage, which is like it's just like a perforated steel cage. And think like a burn barrel, but like a little higher tech, just a little bit. So there's air flown through the whole thing. I use that a lot too.
Right on.
Yeah. Goes hand in
Cool.
hand with the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Boz, you
You're the
are the
man.
man as always. Thank you for making this happen tonight. I know you had a lot going on. It was awesome to spend time with you and the dogs. I appreciate your time, sir.
Man, thank you guys. I'm so stoked every time I get to come and hang with you guys a little bit. Yeah, let's do it again sometime. And hey, if you guys are in and around Nashville, please let me know. I'd love to take you out and have you join in the the war against nature.
Oh, I'm down for that.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I'll see you guys soon, I hope.
Take care.
Take
All
care,
right.
sir.
Yep. See ya.